I'm going to participate in this discussion as well, so y'all can, listen to my thoughts. I know I sent over some questions, so we'll kind of piggyback off of those. But first and foremost, I just want to introduce myself to those who don't know me, since this is being streamed. I am Nicole D. Miller, author of Stories for the Urban Soul, a compilation of stories, novellas, poetry, introducing Black characters in infiltrating spirituality. And you can learn more at NicoleDMiller.com. So if you ladies want to go ahead, start off, just introduce yourself, what you do, maybe how people can contact you, and then just something fun, like what do you like to do for fun? And we can just go in a circle. Maybe we can go like clockwise. Lisa, I don't know how y'all want to do it.
Nicole, you might have to call it out because I think our views may be different.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just do Lisa, Audra, Jamia, Jenna, Hope, and Alicia. Is that okay? And we can keep that order for the rest of the questions.
All right. Who am I after?
Okay. Lisa, Audra, Jenna, Jamia, Hope, Alicia. That's how it looks on my screen. Clockwise.
All right, so I am Lisa Nichols. I am the CEO and founder of Love Your Niche. And what I do is I partner with leaders to own and define their value and to cultivate high-performing, engaging, human-centered teams. And so you can connect with me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, or Facebook at Love Your Niche on Facebook and Instagram, and I would love to connect with you.
Yay.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lisa. I'm Audra Bradfield, recently Carol. I work at Nemours Children's Hospital here in Florida. We are actually also located up north. Like, we're one of the few multi-state children's hospitals. And so I'm a continuous improvement specialist. And what that means, because I usually get a blank stare whenever I say that, I spend most of my time coaching our C-suite, our president of the hospital system, as well as our frontline associates on Lean or Six Sigma. So process improvement, efficiency, and really for us, it's really important to drive waste out of our processes so that we're not asking our associates to do more with less or compromising the care and the service that we're giving to our patients, especially that we get the courtesy or actually privilege of serving children. And so that's what I do all the time. When I'm not doing that, I love dancing. As you guys probably saw recently on a TikTok, whenever Nicole comes, she TikToks. I don't TikTok. I can't. I don't do all that stuff, but when Nicole's around, I'll do it with her. And so folks can reach me on LinkedIn. Happy to be here with all of you guys.
Thank you for putting me on blast. I think is Jamia or Jenna's next. Okay.
Okay, I'll go.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. This is super fun. If you don't know me, my name's Jenna Lear. I own Blue Louie Studio. I am a brand strategist, and I work with purpose-driven women entrepreneurs to help them create and grow a powerful brand, so they can learn how to position themselves as the go-to expert, and then as a result, attract dreamy clients and customers, and really step into making some bold moves in your business. And I believe kind of really looking at the next level, playing bigger, stepping into making some power moves, if you call it, your brand is the key. And so that's what I do in my business. You can contact me on Instagram. We're Blue, like the color, BLUE, Louie, LOUI, Studios, STUDIOS. Or you can, if you're a fellow women business owner, you can join us on Facebook. I have a Facebook group full of 700 women, fellow women business owners, called Six Figure Maven. And when I'm not doing all that, what do I like to do for fun? Well, every Monday, I've actually started to ask myself this question and be super intentional about it this year so that I could really take care of myself this year. That was like one of my goals. And so every Monday I go play basketball, and that is like my happy place. So that's what I do.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Jenna.
Right. My name is Jamia, and I'm a lot of things. I do a lot of things.
Professionally speaking, I'm an educator. I've been teaching for nearly 15 years now. And I know, like, Nicole, I saw your face, like, I know it trips me out too. Like, it's crazy. But so I'm an educator. Also, the host of the soon to be launched Thanksgivers podcast. So I've been working on getting that off the ground. So I'll be excited for that to be out in the world for all to listen soon. For fun, time with my family and friends. Just always, I could be doing anything with them. But just time with them is precious to me and highly enjoyable. And as far as how people can reach me, you can get in contact with me a number of ways. On Instagram, I'm not really a great Instagram user, but I'm trying to develop that. So that's at the Thanksgivers podcast. On Instagram, on Twitter, it's at the Thanksgivers. You probably have a better chance of reaching me on Twitter than you do on Instagram.
Thank you, Jamia.
I am Esperanza Gallon. I am owner of a counseling private practice here in Cincinnati, Ohio. I've been a counselor for a little over 8 years. And yeah, that's a lot of my professional life. You could find me on my personal Instagram at Distinct Hope. And for fun, I love to eat. I love to travel. I like going for like walks in nature, especially the beach.
All right, last but not least, we're working around the last base here. My name is Alicia Ellis. I'm also into a lot of different things. To keep it brief, Masleray is my latest new venture. I started this business 2 years ago. I'm a serial entrepreneur. It means more light. Website is Masleray, Instagram, Facebook, and ultimately I help people share their stories and uplift voices. So we do that through podcasts, blogs, video interviews, and unique events. So I'm excited to be here with this powerhouse of ladies, and thank you, Nicole, for putting this together.
You're welcome. We are all honored to definitely have you and everyone on this panel. To answer your question, Alicia, the Facebook is streaming on my business page. So it's facebook.com/HTOHB. For some reason, it's not letting me chat, so I couldn't chat it. All right, ladies, let's get it popping. Let's dive into these questions. I know everybody's time is precious. The first question that I'll ask is, what does feminism mean to you? So this is purely subjective. You can kick us off, Lisa.
Oh, so much pressure being the first person. Like,
I might reverse the order. I might reverse the order at some point just to, shake it up.
Okay. What does feminism mean to me? This has been really interesting ever since you were asking us these questions and I was preparing for this. I was like, I don't exactly know, so I looked at different definitions and everything. And I think for me, that's part of my own personal, like questioning whether or not I would consider myself a feminist. It really depends on the definition, right? So I think in my mind, when I think of it more in terms of like political movement and kind of where it came from, like how it originated back before I was even born, right? And kind of what developed from there. So I kind of think of it more in that historic sense. And so that's why it's a little bit hard for me to maybe connect with personally at this moment.
Thank you for your honesty. Audra?
Okay. And my kids are like coming in and out of here, so hopefully they'll cooperate. But yeah, so Nicole and I actually had a conversation about this, and I'm glad I have Jamia on here, so she's gonna have to clean me up if I do it the wrong way, but I'm just gonna talk about this as a layman, and I can totally appreciate what Lisa's saying. I know one of the first classes I took at undergrad was a women's studies class that talked about some of the historical nature, but I am by no means an expert on this. I think for me, when I think of feminism, I think of it in the context of being a woman in leadership, a woman of color in the workplace. And I've been, my first leadership position was actually in an evangelical institution where I was the youngest and only person of color and the only female. So that was my introduction to that. And I'm sure from those of you that have any familiarity with that, you can wonder how that went. So, you know that, but now I am on a leadership team, my vice president that has been coaching me since I was in my role as a female. The most senior people on my team are all female. And so I'm Episcopalian, long road from being evangelical. Like I tell people, I appreciate, and I am talking about this in a religious context, because for me, I think that's important to how I view it, because it informs my point of view, as well as what it means to live in America, where white privilege and male privilege is still our story. I mean, we're making some progress, but that is the case. And all of that has impacted me. So for me, when I've heard the word feminism, it's often been weaponized. And it's been weaponized in a way to make women have to shun it away, to say, no, don't affiliate me with that. I'm not crazy. I'm not a lesbian, and I'm not, you know, I'm not going to shave my hair off tomorrow and stop wearing bras and stop shaving and, you know, hate all men, you know, and all these things. And I don't want to cook or wear pink, you know. And so for me, it's like, that's ridiculous. Like, I feel like whenever there's a movement, whether it's, you know, civil rights, or we had the Black Panthers and people were critical with them, or others, when there's people who are oppressed and trying to take a stand, it's not neat. You know, neither is the oppression. And so for me, for folks that are brave enough to stand up and say, hey, we have a problem here, you're not acting right. And I've had years and years of oppression. I'm talking about the United States, but around the world, some still there. Then, you know, I don't care that it's messy, like, and I want to support it. So for me, I would certainly say that I am, but I feel like it's a broad spectrum. Just like I had to give the caveat about Christianity. If you say you're Christian, that's loaded for people. And so I have to often explain what of that expression I'm part of and what of that I don't affiliate with.
Thank you, Audra. And just to mention, I don't know if you mentioned your master's in theology. So that also adds to your insight.
Oh boy, yeah. And it's so funny because I am probably, when outsider looking in, if people didn't know me, they'd probably think that I was some traditional female something or other. Like, you know, like I'm not, I don't know. Like, I don't think that people watching me outside looking in with that probably think that until recently. But yes, Nicole's right. I was also the only female in a Master of Divinity program. And so all of those things, I hate the thought that, and then I'm gonna leave it alone, but I hate the thought that somehow I'm not supposed to do something or have some opportunity just because I'm a female. I am 110% against that. Like, and I have 3 daughters and I'm raising them the same way.
Thank you, Mrs. Carroll. Jenna?
I feel like this question is so simple yet so hard, right? So, and I love that we're approaching it from a subjective place. For me, what is feminism and to be a feminist? It's really a movement of equality for women. And I think, Audra, you're talking about, you know, stereotypes in general, right? And so it's a question of the stereotypes of women. And I really never, it's something that's been a part of like my journey as like a business owner, as like a woman. And it started right after college for me. I won't go into some long story, but what I want to share is that from my point of view, I first noticed the differences of being treated in the workplace in corporate America, right? It was like, holy crap, why does my check look like this, right? Or why am I being asked to do this when that's not a part of my job description, right? Or why am I being put in this category because I'm a young female, and being told, asked, or assumed certain things. And that's when I started to awaken to this concept. And I'm like, there's a serious problem here. And I wasn't educated on that enough, not enough, just a little bit, right? You talk about the history, Lisa, but not enough in current day. And so, what does that look like? It looks like just a fight for equality. And I think the stereotype of hating men when you decide that you are, yeah, I'm a feminist, it means that we hate men. And it's like, oh my gosh, like that's the biggest one to break down. That's not it at all. Can I live? Right? Like, can I live? I'm a woman, and can I live equally? So yeah, there's just so much here, but that's for me and my experience and how I've come into this. That's what I believe.
Thank you.
All right. So my thoughts on, so the question is, am I a feminist? Was that the first
It
one?
was, what is your definition of a feminist, or what does feminism mean to you?
So I guess hearing the term, so in short, the short answer, I would say just being pro-woman. Yeah, to keep it as simple as possible. Now, I will say that I think it is a loaded term, and it is one, kind of like Audra mentioned, that when you're dealing with groups of people that have been oppressed, so we're looking really at power structures and how the term has been weaponized in a negative fashion, because it does like kind of mean all of those other things. Like when you hear of someone being a feminist, like, oh, you have this picture in mind, whether right or wrong, but it's just how we've been conditioned, or at least that's how I've been conditioned, or the types of things that I've been exposed to, where depictions of strong women are, when you see them, they're without feminine qualities, like other things that we would prize as being part of a woman. And so it's almost like if for a woman to embrace, her strength, her agency, gives a view of something wrong with her. She must kind of like, as they were just saying, like, well, she must hate men if this is what she's about, as opposed to a woman being able to embody qualities that are considered feminine and strength, and the ability to to stand on her own, or to have a say in her body or what happens in her life. So those are my thoughts, just being pro-woman.
Similar to what Lisa said, I had to kind of look this up for myself, and like my own loose understanding of feminism, and like what is the reality of that. And definitely I feel like there's different brands of feminism that I think kind of muddies the water a little bit when you're trying to get a definition. But I think for me, it means to be able to have equal rights for women, equal value and significance in the world as women. I don't think, depending on the brand of feminism you're talking about, that means that men and women are equal, and that could be considered good or bad. But just more about the treatment of women, and that women deserve to be treated well. So that's how I would define it for me.
Yeah, I agree with your last statement there, in a sense of just equal rights for women compared to men, and being held in the same equality of those rights to live, to work, to play, to express, to walk, right, to do all those things. So I'll keep mine short, because I think all of you hit some really amazing points on the different brands, to your point, Esperanza, and really looking at what that means in different generations over time. And then, I don't know, I was going more towards that pro-woman, and then the more I listened to that, I was like, well, I know some men that are really pro-woman, but are they pro-women being equal? Right. And I think that's kind of get into the discussion of, like, I know a lot of men who are womenizers and they love women, but they're not pro-women in a sense of us being equal to pay, to equal opportunities, to, being outside of a housewife. Right. And so I know I just kind of challenged when I first got the invite. I was like, I don't know if I want to be a part of this conversation, because I don't even use this word. But I signed up because I think it's important. I feel like just the different generations of us as women, especially women of color in these different spaces, is like, we're fighting not just one thing, we're fighting the wholeness of equality for humanity as a whole. But I can go on and on. Nicole knows me, so we go back and forth all the time. But I think this is a really good discussion in the sense of how things have evolved over generations.
I just want to piggyback like 1 second off of what Alicia said. I have met, especially in my field as a counselor, many men that would consider themselves to be feminists too. So I think sometimes that gets lost in the sauce too, that feminist is a theory, a philosophy. And so you don't have to be a woman to be a feminist. So just throw that out there.
And that's a good point. You guys all hit on some great things. I feel like I'm in good company because I had to research myself. I know I'm the initiator of this conversation, but it really is because I'm still learning and processing my understanding of what that means to me. I've heard the word, quote unquote, thrown around or used in these spheres, but I personally don't say that I identify as a feminist, but maybe it's because of my view of what that is. And I feel like my view was stemmed in more of the extreme versions of it. Now I'm learning that there's different facets of it. To your point, Hope, I did some research and they said that men can be feminists. It's not gender exclusive, apparently. So maybe even as we're growing and evolving, we're all learning like what this really means and taking the extremities out of it. I think I've always shied away from that term, and part of it is also my background and my faith, my spirituality. When we use the word equal, yes, I want equal rights for all, but do I think I can do everything a man can do? I don't. I think we have different roles, and I think we were created to function together and support each other. That kind of goes more into my own view of men and women relationships. So I think I'm still learning and growing, and I'm just picking the nuggets that you guys are throwing out there, and will continue doing studies myself. So thank you all for the first question. We clearly are not going to get through all these questions, but I'll throw on the next question. And if you guys don't mind, we can reverse the order just to kind of shake it up. So we can start with Alicia, Hope, Jamia, Jenna, Audra, and then Lisa. The next question would be, what is your definition of a strong woman? And is that different than a feminist? And so my underlying question is like, can you be considered a strong woman without being considered a feminist? So whatever your thoughts are on those items.
Oh man, see, the good thing about panels, you can kind of tuck in and learn from them that go before you. So now that I'm on the hot seat, I can't really piggyback off of anybody else. But I do, to answer your question, I do think you can possibly identify as both. I was raised by very strong women. We lacked strong men in our family. And it was the strong woman that I believe that who I become because of that, of how I was raised. But I wasn't raised as a feminist, right? So that word never was in my community, in the communities that I came from, the culture, but strong woman was. So for me, I've always identified more as a strong woman aside from being a feminist. I think the more I got educated, the more I learned what that was, and the fight for women equality kind of made me like, well, I could see myself over here a little bit too, but I don't think you have to choose and or. I think it's just a lot of things that come with that word over time. But as a strong woman, for me, I think a lot of things can describe that. And I feel like sometimes as a feminist, that word holds so much negative connotation that it's been through so much. So I've always just been able to identify more as a strong woman just because that's how I was raised and raised by other strong women. So hope that answers your question directly.
It does.
Thanks, Alicia. I feel the same with you, like, oh man, now I'm up at the top of the list. But that being said, I definitely see a difference between strong women and feminists, like how I would define them. I would define a feminist as someone advocating for women's rights, where I would see a strong woman, at least in my experience. And, like you said, Alicia, my own experience have kind of shaped how I see things, but I definitely would see a strong women, at least the ones in my family, improving the whole community and not just for women. It definitely is also not lost on me, like when the intersection with feminism and racism, so that you could advocate for women's rights, but not necessarily women of color. So and that's like a historical challenge I think the movement has. So I identify more with a strong woman myself versus a feminist, because I've seen a strong woman just go through obstacle after obstacle and just make sure they're getting things done, and they're holding their families together, they're holding their communities together, where I feel like a feminist is more singular focus. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but they're not necessarily looking at the whole community.
Is it me?
Sure, you can go. I couldn't remember. Oh, is it Jamia?
Sorry, I'm like,
Go ahead, Jamia.
I'm sorry about that. I'm like, what?
No, I couldn't remember.
I was trying to get to the unmute button, but it like wasn't moving from Esperanza. I don't know, on my screen, so I couldn't hit unmute. Sorry about that.
Technology, girl. Technology.
So strong woman, what comes to mind is just the women that have gone before me and my family, like behind me. You can't really see it. I can reach back here and I have this little plaque that says, I got it from my mama. Like, we have this discussion a lot, her and I, like, okay, you know, what are those things, those qualities that I get from her, you know, that she embodies. But just when I think of the women that have come before me and my family, they just get things done. The women in my family get things done, and done well. And what you gonna say about it? Like, it's like that, you know. They embody just this incredible strength. Yeah, so I hope that is something that I'm walking in, you know, as I continue to grow and continue on with my life, and just something that I can inspire, you know, in the younger women in my family as well. In terms of, you know, is that different than the term feminist? Like, a couple of interesting points have come up. I think another thing to consider is that when we hear the word feminism, it's like words have power, you know, so like who we allow to use what language matters. And so, to Esperanza's point of like, well, it is important to talk about the intersection of feminism and racism, because that has been an issue that has haunted, you know, the feminist movement, so to speak, in terms of equal rights. And specifically, I'm thinking about the women's suffrage movement. But there were issues within the movement because women of color, which there were Black women, Asian women, Native American women, women of Hispanic origins as well, who were involved in the suffrage movement. And that was something that I did not even know, you know, the extent of that until recently. Like, I knew Black women were involved in it, but I was not aware of the other groups. But I think that is something that has plagued the feminism movement for so long, even down to looking at shortly after Trump's inauguration, there was the March on Washington with women. And I don't remember exactly when that happened, but I just remember just a number of the articles that I read around that time, and just looking at some of the coverage, and just looking at how, I guess I'll say, at who was represented and how as being a part of that that movement. So I feel like this is kind of all scattered, what I'm saying, but that's what I got. That's what I got. So, but I think, so I guess the question that I would ask or throw back is like, well, who do we allow to use what language? Because to Alicia's point, feminist, like, that isn't anything that I grew up saying or anything that we even use now. Like, if anything, it's come up in terms of like looking at things historically, or if I'm going to bring things up for my students and wanting to put it in that context, but it's not even a word that's like, that I would say is a part of my everyday vocabulary. But strong women, most definitely.
Thank you, Jamia.
Can you say the question again?
No problem. So what do you feel like a strong woman is to you? What's your definition of a strong woman? And is that different from a feminist? Can you be a strong woman and not a feminist?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I feel like the two are not mutually exclusive, right? Like from the perspective of feminism has its own definitions, right? I think you said Alicia, where you said the word's been through so much. And I was just like, ooh, that's good. Yes, because it's skewed and it means something different to all of us. And I think the same thing goes for what defines a strong woman too. That's subjective, right? And I think we innately kind of look into our closest examples of what we know to be what represents a strong woman. Like my mom and I don't have the best relationship when I think about her, I think about that's a strong woman right there who's also not a feminist. And so like I like to think like, yeah, I'm a strong woman as well. I am a feminist. And to that point that yes, in my opinion, you can be one and not the other. Also, yes, you can be both. But I think it just depends on what the definition is and how you're defining it, both words and then both words collectively, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I guess when I think about it, like with the strong woman part, I'm like a lot of people that I've already talked to. I've described my family as matriarchal several times, like the people that are strong. In fact, I'm half American Indian, and we are matriarchal. Like our chiefs, warriors, and battle, and all the rest are female, like historically. And so, anyway, I think that you can be strong but still be oppressed. And so that is where I see feminism as an important point, that they're trying to remove the oppression. And trying to remove the oppression from any people group that's oppressed is uncomfortable and unpopular. And there's stuff that comes along that. People judge you, people put stuff on you, and that doesn't feel good. And it's much easier to take on a label that's acceptable. And so when I think about Christianity, since I know a lot of people on this call identify with that, you know, Christianity has been run through the mud way more than feminism. And yet we're not as scared or concerned about taking on that label. And I think it's because it's embraced by white males or the privileged class. Like it's okay. It's okay to have that dirty word and put it on you. You know, not okay as much. You got to explain it. You got to caveat it. You got to polish it off if you're going to have the other one, because now you've turned into this whole other thing. But I think that is the mark of oppression. And so I think that you can be strong in different ways, but how much more stronger could the strong woman in my family could have been if they weren't had all this weight on them, all this pressure to be shoved into one lane, one category, you know, even like, I mean, something is silly, but it's not silly, you know, dresses with no pockets, right? You have no pockets, you know, you can't even take stuff with you because it sends a very clear message that you don't need to be as prepared or able as a man does. You know, we just recently got pockets, you know, so there are just things like that that are small, but intentional. You know, we gotta walk, but we gotta walk in high heels. And I love heels. But again, the fact that if you're really a woman, you know, that's what you do. If you're really a woman, you're taking on these things. And so I just feel like when I think about my big mama who was really strong, my mother and others that I really look up to, if they didn't have to take on the weight and then you layer in that they're women of color, could you imagine how much more stronger and how much more brighter their experience in this life could have been, their impact, if they didn't have to walk the line? I mean, it's all over media right now. Like them trying to get the African-American Supreme Court justice. She is walking a line. And it's ridiculous, like that it's still like that in a circus. And so I feel like for me, you can be strong, but I feel like if you're working towards removing the oppression, like I think a lot of feminist sisters are, you could be stronger.
Thank you, Audra.
Wow, like I love hearing everyone's perspectives, and Audrey, you just brought up a number of different things that I'm like, oh yeah, okay, so this is a little bit different than I was thinking, but I love that because it's just seeing all the different perspectives and hearing where everyone's coming from. I love this conversation. I think for me, when it comes to like, it is interesting because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, yeah, strong woman in my mind and the way that I, throughout my life, I've always thought that was a positive thing. Feminist, not always. It's gone back and forth. It changes. I'm really like, ooh, I don't know. Depends what you mean. But as Audra's talking about, fighting against the oppression and everything, I'm like, yes, all for that. But on the other hand, something else that I realized as you all were talking is, bringing in the intersection of feminism and racism. And I realized that that's one of the things that, I always think about that aspect. So I think I associate the word feminism in largely a white context, but I associate strong woman as like everybody. And so I don't know, so that's also part of the reason that I'm like, yes, I'm all for strong women. And I want all women to have, every opportunity and to really be able to own our own unique value. But it's also interesting because on a personal level, like for most of my life, I mean, someone had mentioned about wearing pink earlier, right? And so like as a small child, I loved pink. It was my favorite color. But then I got to a point and for some reason I was like against all these, I didn't want all these like really feminine things. I didn't want anything pink. I wasn't one of those girls. I don't cry all the time. I don't do this, like I wanted this division between myself and other women. And so I'm not even sure where that came from, but I think that that's just an interesting thing that while all the time I'm like, yes, I want to be a strong woman, but even that was skewed at different points because I'm like, closing myself off to certain aspects of me because I think, oh, that's not a strong woman, or I don't want to be like that. So that's kind of some of my experience.
Thank you for sharing, Lisa. I feel like I need to be taking notes. I did jot down a little something, but I really appreciate you sharing about filtering the word feminism through a white cultural lens. I feel like I've done that, and that's been another reason why I've shied away from that word. But you being a white woman saying that is like, wow, that's deep. But I think one of the definitions I looked up on feminism, I'll just read it, is the advocacy of women's rights on the basis of the equality of the sexes. So kind of going back to an earlier point, for me, if it's just equality, then yes, I'm all for it, for sure. But I also probably still wrestle with the intersection of racism and being a woman of color. And part of that is my own experience. Society sees me as a Black person first and then a woman. Experiencing racism from another white woman in the workplace for me was very triggering. And so I know that I'm still kind of dealing with that and healing from that because I can, come alongside all generations and skin tones of women, but in the world, first and foremost, I'm seen as a Black person. So there's just this wrestling with that that I know that I'm still kind of going through in terms of my affiliation with the word feminism. But I come from a long line of strong women. You already know. Hope got me this cup. If you can read it, powered by the Black women before me. And my, interpretation of strong is these women were resilient. They were overcomers. They didn't let anything stop them. They overcame obstacles and adversity and really set a great example for me to do the same. So I do think you can be a strong woman and not a feminist. I do think there are strong women who are feminists, but it seems like it's more subjective to you and what you're taking from that movement and not necessarily what others have taken it, and to the point of Christianity. Like there's a lot of horrible people out there that have called themselves Christians. And I personally don't even really identify with that term. I use it for other people to understand some of my, foundational beliefs, but I typically refer to myself as a believer. So that's a whole nother topic. So Anyways, I appreciate you guys sharing. It's one more question that I'm wondering, because it's pretty meaty, and I kind of like spoke into it just now. I know Jenna touched on it, so I'm just gonna throw it out there and y'all can catch it and see what you get from it. And let's start with Jamia. So let's switch up the order. Let's do Jamia, Hope, Audra, Alicia, Lisa, Jenna. Y'all got that? Because I might not remember. All right. So this next question is, have you ever experienced sexism in your career or in the workplace? Do you want to elaborate on your experience? And something I forgot to share, but I did share it in the email, is if you don't feel comfortable answering, you can say pass. So there's no pressure.
Well, you know, I am in a female dominated profession. So being a secondary educator, I think probably if I was at the university level, then I would see, you know, more men in those positions. But, you know, as I'm thinking of any issues that have come about and me teaching, they've been more so due to age or years of experience in the classroom or race, but not sexism, because the majority of the people who are in positions of authority in a school system are women, like from, you know, early on to beyond that. So yeah, I definitely had another topic I wanted to bring up, and Nicole knows what it is. That's why she's laughing.
I don't. I'm just like, okay, go ahead and bring the topic.
I'm just gonna say this because I don't know if I'll have another opportunity to say it, but just in terms of just an observation. So, and this is, and I really don't want to derail anything either. So even though that's kind of what I'm about to do. But so I have made an observation that there have been, I think men oftentimes, some men have an issue with seeing a woman embody strength and agency. And how that shows up, or one of the things that I've noticed that go along with that, is that randomly asking a man one day, like, oh, like we got on a conversation of a topic of conversation around Beyonce. And so it was like, and the particular person I'm thinking of, he had a real like problem with her. Like, as I explored, like, what is this about? What do you mean? And I just thought it was interesting that those were his thoughts. But it actually has been something that has come up multiple times now. So probably there's been at least 4 instances that that I've been, you know, a part of, like asking, like, oh, so what? It got to where I was asking a direct question, like, so tell me, what are your thoughts on Beyonce? Because I think that she is someone that embodies strength, and I'm not even in the hive. I'm not even saying that, but it's just, what I have noticed is that if he has a problem with a woman showing such agency as she does, like she is a strong woman, the men that I'm thinking of, there have been certain character flaws, I would say, patterns of poor character that have been revealed like soon after or just before they shared their thoughts on her, you know. So that's all I really wanted to contribute to this feminism conversation. I told Nicole that ahead of time. So that's all I got for you. That's been my experience. So
Thank you, Jamia.
I love it. Fit it in where you get. That is a strong woman taking agency. I have something to say. I'm gonna say it. Gosh darn it. I love it. To answer the question, I really haven't had that many experiences, well, really none. I actually pulled up my resume and was like, surely there's been something like that I just forgot about, but not so much. I've been fortunate that most of the male supervisors or higher ups I've had have been actually really phenomenal leaders. So I haven't really experienced sexism, I would say, as I can't remember, someone mentioned it. I've definitely experienced some ageism for sure. And definitely some blatant and not so blatant experiences of racism. And in recent years, in my field of counseling, definitely some issues of classism in terms of on the workforce part, as well as like clients being able to access services and things like that, and comments being made about those, of a lower economic status and things like that. So not so much, sexism, but I just gathered some of the other isms, for fun. So
Thank you.
Yes, I know my friends that know me well know that this has been my whole life. So I started working at NASA when I was 16, and it's a technical field, and I stayed there throughout college afterwards. Then, as I mentioned, I was in leadership for like probably one of the biggest evangelical organizations, and then now we're in a hospital. So very science, and engineering, and all and biblical studies, which all of those are a big no-no if you're going to do that if you're a woman. So yes, tons, tons of sexism. They make it very clear that you don't belong there. And so it's a fight. Like it's a fight to be in those fields. I believe it just has been clearly God's calling on my life. It wasn't necessarily something that I picked. And I feel like myself and other women, my sister is a doctor, a physician, like we have stories upon stories of whether it's some mentor stepping on a line trying to take a pass at you, or some males that if you're at a team banquet, they're asking you to serve the food, or they're asking, everything you see on the worst videos about what's happening in a meeting, and a guy says the same thing that you just said, and now you're going to move forward with that. And so, those areas and a lot of those situations are designed to keep women out. They have come a long way because of the war of going through that. And so, I just think that going to Jamia's thought, so Jamia does tie in Beyonce. I think that I am a big Beyonce fan. I'm not registered in the Hive. I'm not sure, but I'm a huge fan. They all know. And I also really love Madden. I love my husband. He's amazing. And so, but I think that it's like we all know the things, right? I think we could write a list that's on the no list for women still in 2022. It's like, you can't make more money than the person that you're with, or any man in particular. And if you do, you need to hide it, right? It's still very well documented in films. If you move up, even now we saw it with the new, Miss Jackson, or the Honorable Jackson, who's up for Supreme Court Justice. She has to apologize and kind of say publicly how she may have not have been the best mother. There are just things that, even sexually, right? Like you're taught like, oh, you need to please your man if he left you. Well, maybe he didn't please me. Maybe I left him for that. It's just that we are always under the bus. It's just like, be under the bus. Like, you got to give so many excuses whenever you step into the man lane, and that's the lane of success in underrepresented fields of money, of power, of influence. If you stay out of those lanes, or you do a really good job apologizing once you're in them, then you're okay. And if you don't, then they're coming for you. Be ready to enter the war to stay there. And I don't think, again, I've worked for government, nonprofit, religious, not religious, it doesn't matter. This is still our reality if you're not in a female-dominated field. And I believe that was the case. We have it well documented throughout history. I thought it was very telling. I had a friend from Japan that told me he grew up learning from his parents that were white and from Ohio that Martin Luther King was a menace to society. And now we think that's ridiculous.
Wow.
But then this was acceptable, good teaching. Okay. And so these things that just seem like, woof, they're tripping over there. It's like, thank God Martin Luther King was tripping. Thank God that he was the rebel of table talk. And I'm sure myself too, like, what is this woman doing here? What is she doing? Doesn't she know that God doesn't want women in leadership? Doesn't she know that God doesn't want women speaking out in church? And if you do, you better get the permission of the deacons and the pastor, and you better apologize before you ever say anything. And it's the same with technology. It's the same across the board. And so, for me, I think we've made some great strides. We have a female vice president who's an AKA in my sorority. Hey, Kamala. Anyway, but we made some great strides, but we have much more to do. And I feel like, when we can't get behind a movement that's trying to help remove the oppression because it's not perfect. Like I have a painting up in my office that has Martin Luther King and Malcolm X on it. And they usually try to pit those two against each other because one was peaceful and one was not. I'm like, they both got it done, and they got it done for me before I was born. And so for me, it's like, I'm behind that. I'm not behind everything they did exactly, but I'm not behind any human being on everything they've done exactly. God uses imperfect people to do amazing things. God is using imperfect women who have been oppressed and hurt by men. They're in the front lines of war. We seem to understand that when it's a war veteran, but when there's a female warrior out there trying to pave a new way in technology, in the government, or in the church, then we have to hold back. We don't know if we want to be affiliated with her. And I'm just not doing it. Like, I'd rather mistakenly back them up than be on the wrong side of history for this one, because it matters for me and it matters for my daughters. So yeah, I think the sexism is still a hot mess and it's very real. And if you don't see it, it's the same people that say, I don't see color. Like, you're with them, in my opinion.
So should we just drop the mic? I mean, I don't know what else to say at this point. Besides two things. One, you need to make this a series, Nicole. Two, the real got canceled. So I think this might be the new female dominant talk show.
Hey, if we can get paid.
I'm just saying, to answer the question directly, yes, definitely has happened in the workplace as an entrepreneur, but I think to similar other women of color, it's not just being, you hit all three, right? For me, it was I'm very young, woman, Latina. It's just like, well, which one is it that I'm being discriminated against? You pick, you tell me which one you want to use today to tell me I can't do X, Y, and Z. And then you add strong. Oh, you're too ambitious, or, you're just doing too much. I'm like, okay, what is too much? And then another layer I would add is the culturalism of it. It's like, you can't have long nails, or you can't wear hoops, or you shouldn't wear this type of outfit. And I was taught that very young in my career, that now, oh, do I love to wear all of that and be all of that because I have my own. You can't tell me I'm not going to work for someone. And that's another reason why I love being a business owner myself and an entrepreneur, because I can come as me and I can create a space for other women to come as you. And that to me is the biggest threat, not just to men as a whole, but to that whole mindset, because it's not just women. I had a woman mentor who was an older generation, woman, and she was a Black woman, and I loved her mentorship, but she was coming from that generation that had to break through the ceiling, but then she created ceilings for us, right? So like, she couldn't wear shirts past her mid-arm, and no open toe shoes, and you couldn't wear lipstick, and you couldn't color your nails. And it's just like, at that time, like, we're in 2018. If you're going to tell women who are coming through college that you can't do that, you're not going to have an impact. You're not going to reach these younger women. And for me, I felt like God put me in a position to be a bridge there. But I don't think it's just men. I think it's a culture too of other, maybe older women that had to be a certain way to get through in their career, that instead of when they break through, not to try to put those broken pieces back together for us to break through again. It's like, once that glass is broken, once that ceiling's broken, we need to continue to open that thing up beyond. But I think those are like intergenerational conversations that we have to do a better job having. But I'll leave that we need to do a series of this conversation, because there's so much meat, and possibly think about podcast show or some type of talk show, because there's a lot of things that, and bringing men into this conversation is very necessary, because they need to understand it, and we need to understand where they're at just as much as we want them to understand where we're at. So great job, Nicole, and the ladies here.
Well, thank you. And there is more to come on that note, but Jenna, did you want to share more, or, because I know you kind of spoke to this earlier.
Yeah. So, well, really what came up for me was like, because I was doing the same thing as somebody said earlier, I was kind of like bringing up my resume, if you will, because I've been working for myself for the last, 3 or 4 years. And what actually popped up for me was something at the very beginning of my career. And it was, to bring it back into just a very like small experience and how this is like something that's actually happening everywhere. I remember I was pulled into a meeting to basically, when you're a designer, you're pulled into meetings and they're like, okay, everybody put your thing out and then we'll pick who we like best, right? And I was working under the head designer, who was a male. And we put out our examples of the project that was due. Mine was picked as someone who just came out of college. I was a young female on top of all of that. And I was college educated and he was not. He learned just through, experience in life. And it was funny to kind of take a look back and see like, wow, I wasn't in any more meetings after that. And then maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, I was fired. And yeah. And it's kind of crazy. It's maybe I blocked it, right? Like, it's kind of crazy to look back and say, wow, that actually did happen. And I think it was, a clear block of advancement, right? Like, there's someone who's like, maybe like has better designs than me or could be chosen and I'm not chosen, and just ego and all the things that play out. I didn't ask him what he thought afterwards, but as we know now, it's like a clear block of advancement. And I think for a really long time in corporate, I struggled to find my voice. So I became more submissive, more like, okay, what do you need? When do you need it? Type thing. And it was really kind of what led to me being a business owner and working for myself, was this like friction of, do I play the game, or do I honor who I am and honor what I bring to this world and honor the space? Do I take up the space? Right. And so throughout that, I was also talked over, interrupted, which is now like one of my biggest pet peeves, when I'm interrupted like mid thought. And that also contributed to like me trying to find my voice and what I can contribute and how I can make an impact and do the work I do. And it's what's led to me working mostly with women in my own business. I work almost exclusively with women. And really, it's a part of my movement. Nicole knows this. Like, my movement that I'm on is, yes, helping others grow brands and really kind of find their presence and building their business and marketing. But deeper than that, like, I want to see more women leaders in the world, because I think it's having more women leaders in the world that really creates that change that we're all talking about right now, that's still so needed and will continue to be. So that's kind of like the quick overview of like something that happened and kind of where it's led me. And I'm really honored and blessed, and I want to say lucky, but also I worked really hard to get to where I am, to start to change that narrative, not just for me, but for other women as well. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Just to confirm, everyone's spoken on this topic, correct?
I didn't yet.
I wasn't sure. Go ahead, girl.
No problem. So it's really interesting because I recently, like in the last year, had an experience with this. And I realized at that point it had been a long time since I was in that sort of a setting, because I own my own business and I've been working with a lot of women. I also work with men, but they come to me as clients, right? So that's a different thing. I have great male clients. But I was in this situation where I'd had great conversations with a VP in the company. And then he was like, okay, we're going to bring in the CEO to have a conversation about doing this contract, me contracting with them, doing this project. And it was one of those times when, I'm sure everyone here has had that experience, where you just like, I walked away from that meeting feeling very small and very dismissed because of the way that the CEO approached me. And he was very young. He was a young CEO of this company, and but he did not have like, there was no like respect there for me as a person, as I just felt like I didn't know anything, or he thought I didn't know anything. And it was very like jarring because I hadn't been in that situation in so long. And so it's very much there. And certainly depending on what industries you're in, I have clients come to me all the time who've had similar, really bad situations with it. So I definitely, like Jenna said, part of my goal is to help women find their voice and really own their value and communicate it with confidence and overcome these things so that we have more women leaders who are doing amazing things. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Lisa. And we are going to wrap this up. So I will share. I want to just hype up Jenna a little bit because I did her conference this week. And one thing that I loved about it was that it was diverse. And it was just beautiful to see a multitude of women with different skin tones. And that's one of the reasons why I tried to put this panel together to mix it up. Like, let's try to get a variety of ethnicities. We have Native American, we have Latino, we have white, we have Black. So I'm really grateful for that. When I think about my journey, because my background's in corporate, when I think about sexism, I can't pinpoint like blatant sexism. I think I had a very unique experience of being affirmed as a leader for most of my work experience, even straight out of college. But I do have a memory of experiencing harassment when I was younger as a teen. And I think a lot of my struggles has been, if there's such a thing as gender-based classism, I'm just gonna make up this term, but I feel like that's what's existed for me in the Black community. And what I mean by that is facing that from Black men. So I feel like what I'm awakening to and realizing is like, oh, these Black men really think that I'm down here and want to, and Alicia pointed this out earlier, abuse, misuse. I'm just gonna use the word pimp. Like, I don't know. And so I'm just realizing that it's within my community as a Black person that a lot of this happens with Black women, where your feminism is looked down on in a variety of ways. So I haven't personally experienced it in work, but I'm sure I have a multitude of experiences in my community of Black men looking at Black women as lesser than. So I'm gonna throw that out there. I did wanna kind of toss out something Alicia said too, with wearing your hair a certain way and your clothes a certain way, and that whole mindset. I'm so glad to be free from that. I definitely had to play the game in corporate in that aspect, and it's like so much freedom when that's off of you, and you can actually switch up your hair every other day or wear your fro or do your thing, and your clients have chosen you and all that entails, so it doesn't matter to them. So, and I think those are my points. So it is 7:09. I am so grateful for you guys. I know this was a lot and I didn't realize how meaty it would be. So there's going to be some type of sequel. I'm like nervous that Facebook going to kick us off because we've been saying some like heavy hitting stuff. And I'm like, I hope they don't shut us down. But I'm just tripping because I got shut down from another platform a while ago. So, but I do want to end really quick with this message from Sojourner Truth that I came across, and it just really like hit me. So if you guys can give me a few moments, I just want to read this. Apparently she delivered a famous speech called Ain't I a Woman? And it was in Akron, Ohio, which is like near Cleveland. So I just want to read part of this that really just stood out to me. Ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could heed me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, None but Jesus heard me. Ain't I a woman? So I love it. I love it. I love it. Whew, Lord. So I just wanted to end on that note. If you guys have any last tidbits, you could throw it out there. The floor is yours.
I would just like to say, can everyone drop their Instagram handle in the chat? I want to follow everyone because this is so good. I would love to stay connected.
Yeah, and I can send a follow-up email and let you guys connect that way too, since I have everyone's information.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing us all together and for just starting this conversation. I love it. I think it's really beneficial to just hear from everybody's perspectives and experiences.
Yeah, it was definitely a blessing. It was something that's been on my heart for a minute. And Jamia is the one that had reminded me of Women's History Month. So I really wanted to push it for this month. So it all worked out.
I will add one tidbit just about this, what you just shared from Sojourner Truth. That was at the Seneca Falls Women's Suffrage Convention. And so it was just a part of the women's suffrage movement. Just wanted to bring that up.
That's why you're here. Hand selected, okay? All right, so I see some, oh, hey, Tay Tay. Little strong woman in the making, okay? Don't sleep on that one.
Okay, say bye. Say hi. Bye. Hi. You know, for fun, my oldest daughter, Loriana, so in our American Indian culture, we do a naming ceremony. So my lightest two haven't done theirs yet, but my my oldest daughter, who's going to turn 12 here with the Aries season here, her American Indian name is Cookie Pesniwin, which means not afraid woman. And so I just think, you know what? It's in our blood.